Let's begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. We're going to rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And the time is 7:02 p.m. I'd like to welcome everyone to the Westwood Planning Board meeting. I'm Dave Atkins, and I will be chairing the meeting tonight. All of our meetings are recorded by Westwood Media Center. If there's anyone else who would like to record this meeting, please announce yourself now. We'll give you permission. If not, then we'll continue. As a reminder, please turn off your cell phones. The agenda is available at the back of the room. The meeting will follow the order on the agenda, and it will be civil. All people will be treated respectfully. The format of the meeting is that when an item is called, the applicant will come forward to the podium, or to the front here, and present their application to the board. The board will proceed to staff comments, and then board members will ask questions of the applicant. Then the public will be given an opportunity to comment. When it's time for the public comment period, the chairman will call those wishing to speak to the podium. Once at the podium, please identify yourself by stating your name and address for the record. All comments and questions shall be directed through the chair. All people will be given the opportunity to speak, but in the interest of time and fairness, repetitive or off-topic comments may be cut short. First of all, Abby, are there any changes to the agenda?
No changes.
So if there are no changes to the agenda, the first item is 100 Brigham Way, Brigham and Women's University Station, public hearing for special permit pursuant to sections 9.75 and 9.3 of the zoning bylaw for hazardous materials in the Water Resource Overlay Protection District. Welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Board, thank you for having us come tonight. It's our pleasure to be back. I was just remembering that we were last before you in, I think, March of 2017. And since then, our 30,000 square foot medical office building is up and running. And I'm anxious to introduce the operations team tonight, because I think they'll be most helpful to answer your questions. First, I want to introduce Cindy Peterson, who is Vice President of Regional Ambulatory Operations, and she'll introduce some other folks as we go along. Cindy?
Okay, I won't talk long, but as Steve said, I'm Cindy Peterson. I'm with the Brigham Women's Ambulatory Operations team. I'm joined tonight by my colleague, Dr. John Boyer. He's the Director of Environmental Affairs at Brigham Women's Hospital. And we also have one of our nurses, Jeanette Austin, project manager, Christy Goulet. Before I turn it over to Dr. Boyer, I just wanted to note that our new site here in Westwood at University Station has been received very well by our patients. They're really delighted not to have to schlep into Boston when they can be right here in town and get great care and access to Brigham doctors. Our medical office building offers Brigham Women's specialties including cardiology, gastroenterology, general surgery, endocrinology, neurology, neurosurgery consults, OBGYN, orthopedics, physiatry, urology, as well as primary care, radiology, and phlebotomy. And we'll be adding dermatology hopefully next week. So thank you, and I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Boyer.
Good evening, everyone. You can call me John. Thanks for taking the time to hear us tonight, and thanks for reviewing our application. We want to try to go through specifically what you need to hear from us. We're happy to hear from and see in the letters that have been shared with us, both from the building inspector and then also from Weston and Sampson engineers, that it seems that our application has been well received, but there might be some remaining questions that you have to ask of us. And specifically, I wanted to start by going into a little overview on our facility, which I think you probably know well, just briefly, and then go into the specific chemicals that have been listed of potential concern that we feel we have handled well, but we wanted to then give you a chance to ask any questions about those. So I'll stop there, and does that sound like the agenda that you are hoping to hear?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, sure. I could go up, I realize that everyone's somewhat new to this format, so I could go up to the board if necessary. I think it might be most efficient, but you can tell me if you have a different opinion. If I just leave that particular slide up, and then I would go into the specific chemicals, what each one is and what they do. And then from there, I would go into the controls that we have in place, and then we could go to questions and answers. Does that sound good? Okay, awesome. So the first slide that, I'm not sure if everyone can see it, but the first slide that's up there is really just an aerial view of our facility. So if you're, thank you, the top of the slide there is, as it indicates, facing towards University Avenue. And then the bottom of the slide there is the parking lot section. And if you see the A that's noted there at the bottom, that will be an important point to note because that is really where our shipping and receiving dock is. And so we'll be discussing that area quite a bit. The arrows and the nomenclature there we have laid out for you to try to give you the most pertinent information about the application. But if there are, and we have a couple of other slides to share with you in relation to our operations and specific elements of the operations, clinical areas that we can go into maybe after I go through the chemicals. How does that sound? Okay. Anything more about that slide that you guys would like clarification on? No. Okay. So in terms of the specific chemicals, obviously we had submitted a large list of chemicals and we had categorized those into 3 categories that were requested: hazardous chemicals, non-hazardous but non-household items, and then household items. So the list that I'm going to go through is really just the hazardous chemical list, which I think is most relevant here. And though it's actually an expanded list because we received in the initial letter from Mike Perkins, the building inspector, a list of 9, which that list was generated earlier on, immediately after his walkthrough with us at the facility. And then we received a subsequent list, which is actually, we received on October 19th from Weston and Sampson Engineers, and that is actually a list of 13 chemicals. They were all on our various lists that we had submitted to you, but what we have done tonight is merge those 2 lists just to make sure that we're being comprehensive about what the various parties might want to see, and to give you a chance to ask any questions about those. So if I could proceed from there, I'm just going to go through the chemicals. So I'll start with the list. So this is coming from the list from Mike Perkins, and on that list there were 9 chemicals. And so I'll start with those, but does everyone have access to this letter from Mike Perkins? I can just go through it. If you do, the first thing I'd like to point out about that is there are some chemicals on that list that actually we don't have on site any longer. So the first one that's on, it's a bulleted list, it's a 3M Avogard Instant Hand Antiseptic with moisturizers. We actually, that's no longer on our list, we've actually taken that off. And so that one but if you're curious about it, it's really just it's a hand wipe, it's a disinfectant. Okay. Then the second one I'm going to take off the list is a Cavicide. It's another disinfectant that is used for instruments, but it's also not on our list any longer. So those have been stricken, so I just wanted to kind of clear that up off the top. Okay? And so then I'll jump to the first one on Mike's list, that on the building inspector's list, which is Asteris Prolistica Enzymatic Cleaner. And so essentially what that is that's it's a cleaner. We listed it as a hazardous chemical because it is not commonly used in the house, obviously. This is a chemical that's used, essentially it's an enzyme, and it is used to break up blood and body materials that might be accumulated on medical instruments during a procedure. And it actually comes to us in a very dilute form. It's actually neutral, which means it's the same pH as water. So that's essentially what it is and what it does. Is that a good level of detail for each of the chemicals? I'll proceed if that's a good level of detail.
That's good. Yeah.
Okay, all right. And so I'm actually just gonna go, now I'm just gonna kind of launch into the list that's a merged list from the building inspector and Weston and Sampson engineers. So the next one that I have on my list is liquid nitrogen. So that might be a concerning thing to folks, and it can be from a general safety perspective. We actually only have one container of liquid nitrogen in our facility at any one time. It's in a metal dewar, a stainless steel dewar we call them. So it's a very robust type container. We actually will receive essentially a 25-gallon dewar that will last us quite a bit of time, a matter of days if not weeks, depending on our volume of patients. And essentially that will, once it will come into the loading dock in a full container under all DOT requirements. I can go into the spill stuff after I go through the specific chemicals, the spill potential items. So that will come to one of our storage locations in the building. And then the way that's used is, or what it's used for essentially freezing warts off of patients. So we have a dermatology clinic, as Cindy mentioned, and that's what it does, what it is and what it does. So the interesting thing about liquid nitrogen is if it's spilled, it actually volatilizes very quickly. And so from a water contamination potential, it's actually quite low because it freezes on contact, and then it's very unlikely to travel very far. I can go into more questions on that, so I'll just proceed through the list. So the next one is a neutral buffered formalin solution. And this is actually a 10% formalin, so that's actually a fairly dilute form of formalin. Formalin is a preservative. We use that in our dermatology clinics to preserve tissue samples. And so if you've ever been to the physician's office and you've had, a slight sample taken off of you or a family member, it's a very small amount. It's actually stored in exam rooms in very small amounts. And it would be available for the clinician. They would actually take their sample, they would put it in the small container. I actually brought some props for you just to get a sense of kind of what we're talking about. Little plastic cups, this would be a large amount that we're talking about. All right, so it would be put in a sample container, something like that potentially after it's taken from a patient, with a very small amount that's primarily absorbed by the tissue sample and by the sample itself. And then that would be shipped off-site to be analyzed at our main campus. Yeah, and it's sealed up, it's a plastic container, very difficult to leak, and it's a tiny amount even if it was. Formaldehyde is a volatile chemical, so it actually, if it touches the air, it actually vaporizes very quickly. So that's kind of what it is and what it does. The next one on the list is trichloroacetic acid. And this is something similar. It's another very small volume chemical that we use, and it's used also for samples, preservation of samples in our OBGYN clinic. So very similar process, even though the chemical is slightly different. These chemicals in larger quantities can have some toxic properties, but the volumes are so low that the likelihood for exposure and certainly for traveling into surface water is very low. So that's what that does and what it is and what it does. Moving on down the list, all of these you'll notice a pattern. These are for clinical tissue sampling for the most part, or some type of frontline testing that takes place. So the next one is a Michaels transport medium. So it has some chemicals in it, like magnesium sulfate, as an example. It's 1%, so there are a few chemicals in there, but they're very tiny percentages. That is also used in our dermatology exam rooms. It's on the second floor of our facility, and those are kept in. The tissue sample is put in a plastic container. The sample is collected and sent off-site. And so this next one is called Thin Prep. It contains water and methanol. So methanol is a flammable agent. It's 40% methanol, but again, it's a tiny volume. The volume of the container is 20 mLs, and so that if you're looking at a graduate, it's about this much. Maybe on the bottom of this container, it could be that much. A very tiny amount. And so, again, it's collected in a plastic cup, it's sampled, and then it might be taken to a point-of-care testing area in our clinic, or just adjacent to the clinic, for a separate sample, or it could be sent off-site for subsequent analysis. These next, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. These are all in the category of what we call point-of-care testing. These are essentially lab samples. They're lab procedures. So what would that be? That would be a glucose test. So it would be if there's a blood draw that's taken in an exam room or in a phlebotomy area of the clinic, then a small blood sample could be taken to a separate area or analyzed in the exam room, and that would then be mixed with a small amount of chemical, and it would either change color or it would coagulate, or it would go through some type of change that would indicate some type of clinical finding. And so really all of these are, again, they're in the most 90 mLs, which would be maybe the full container that I just showed you, but we wouldn't always use that. 26 mLs, 2.5 milliliters, 100 milliliters, 30 milliliters, 8 milliliters, 15 milliliters. So these are, this is the rapid HCG quality control reagents. So again, it's something that's mixed with a sample to make it change. We've got a rapid strep kit, so that might be, you know, a swab or something like this, that you then take a swab and then you dunk it in something, and then, you know, that could be the actual procedure. We've got DCA reagents. It's in a cartridge form, 2.5 mLs, which is a tiny amount. Urinalysis quality control, so that would be a urine sample, or it's either analyzing the sample itself, or it would be a quality control for the instrument which is a handheld instrument that analyzes the urine. pH testing, these are pH strips, so it could be in a little cartridge like this, or you've probably seen pH paper. You dunk it in, to a sample and it changes color based on the pH of the sample. Glucose meter quality controls, again, so this is specifically for a glucose meter. If any of you have diabetic folks in your family or friends, you know that those glucose meters have to be calibrated on occasion, and so they sometimes require a chemical standard, essentially, to be inserted into the glucose meter to allow it to determine if it's in range. So that's kind of what that would be. 8 milliliters, a tiny amount again. And then this final one, Hematocult Sensa Developer. So these are all in our point of care testing. These are lab test kits, and they're done either in the exam room or a point of care testing room. So I just went through 16 items, and I struck, actually there was one more that I did, 15 items. There was one listed in the building inspector's report, which is a phenol solution. We actually no longer have a phenol solution. We do have, that may have been confused with isopropyl alcohol, which was on one of our original lists, but it was listed as a household item because most of us have rubbing alcohol, bless you, in our houses. And so, but we will have a little bit of that. It could either be in little packets, you've seen the alcohol rubs, or a small amount of alcohol. The main issue with that is that it's flammable, but we have flame storage cabinets, a small one, that if we have any bottles, it would just be in a small plastic bottle that we would have on site. So that gets us through the list of hazardous chemicals. Again, I would say the themes are, they're not in industrial strength. I would say the largest quantities that we have are the Prolistica, which is a very dilute form. It not only comes in dilute form, but then we dilute it even more, of 1 ounce to 1 gallon. And that's literally dumped into a sink, and it's used to scrub instruments. And so it's essentially water. It's neutral. It's already neutral, and it's even less of a concern once it's diluted. So the other one is the liquid nitrogen, which I explained in a 25-gallon dewar, that I can go into the controls that we have in place. So that's the list of what they are and what they do. I didn't know if you wanted more detail about those before we kind of go into the controls that we have for each. I'll stop there.
I was wondering, all your descriptions indicated that's very small amount, very small amount.
Correct.
But we're obviously talking about more than household quantities, so if you
Sure.
amass a lot of small amounts somewhere.
Correct.
Are they in various offices, in
No.
a closet, in one room? Where
So I
are they
would
stored?
say, sorry, yeah, a combination of those things. So I actually will answer those when if you, I can advance, or if someone wants to advance to the next slide. Would you like me to use the overhead to kind of help explain that? Sure. So this is the first floor of our facility. That first one was kind of an overview. So if you again look at the bottom of the screen there, where you see that A denoted, so that would be where things are received. So I'll pause there. So that's where all of our materials and supplies will come in, per standard. And there will, to your point, we will have essentially cases of some of these small items packed in containers that are designed not to be able to break and not to be able to spill. Though certainly if you I don't know, threw it up in the air and let it crash on the ground, that, you might get it open, but then they're all in plastic containers, and so it's very unlikely that it could break, but that would be the opportunity, and we'll talk about kind of our procedures there. But in terms of where they're stored in the building, they're taken from A, and then up to that first arrow to that first hallway, and then many of the unused materials will be taken down that hall to the left to B, where you see B, the floor 1 clean supply. And so there would be clean supply storage there. And that's really where most of the things would stay, in a controlled environment, in a rated room. Most of you are probably familiar with the building codes and fire requirements. Most of the concerns would really be around flammability. So we've got them in flame storage cabinets inside a rated room under controlled conditions. And then on a daily basis, trained staff, based on the expected volume of patients for that day, would go to that room, and then they would collect the amounts that would be needed, and then they would distribute them to exam rooms, again into locked cabinets. And so there could be a couple of these small items placed into locked cabinets that exist in the exam rooms, waiting for the patient to come and the clinician to use them. So yes, they come in cases of the quantities that we expect to have on site at any one time. Really, we kind of increase those to be the maximum potential, are listed in the list that we provided with our application. And so that's kind of the way they would be received and stored and distributed. Does that answer your question?
It does, thank you.
Okay.
So I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
Are the chemicals that are gonna be at Westwood, are they comparable to the amounts that are at your other satellite facilities, or?
Well, we have different types of satellites. I would say that they're less. There would be less than our Foxborough facility, truthfully. That's the answer.
Have you spills at any of the other facilities?
We have not. So with these types of things, we would occasionally have something dropped inside an exam room, but again, it's such a small quantity that then the trained staff would be able to respond and take care of that, and essentially most of the things could be wiped up with a small 12 by 12 spill kit pad, absorbent pad, and some of them, truthfully, if it's like 5 or 10 milliliters, you can wipe that up, depending on what it is, with a paper towel.
Now, I did drive by there today. I didn't see where the receiving.
It's in the back.
It's in
So
the
if you
rear.
drove by,
So, was
yeah.
it designated though? Because I saw the line for the fire, but I didn't see anything for.
There is, I believe, a receiving sign on the door. Yes,
Because I know that it says that they need to cover the storm drains when.
correct.
And so, how many storm drains are there?
So there's one.
One.
There's one.
There's just one there. If you would like, I can go into procedures around deliveries, or
Right. No, I read the book, but what I was wondering was, do you guys keep a log on every delivery that comes and who's?
sure. So there'll be a manifest. We have central supply chain. And so for any given day, the receiving staff that work in the receiving room there will have lists of products that they expect to receive for that day. And there will be, obviously we haven't fully opened yet, and none of these products are being delivered now because we're not using them. But once we hopefully open soon, we will have lists of what's expected for delivery that day. We will have specific times of the day where certain vendors for certain products, supplies, and materials will deliver. And then the receiving staff would be there. The protocol that they've all been trained. So we actually trained all of our staff last week in standardized procedures. Actually, my team did that training. So essentially they'd have their list of what's expected. They'd have a specific delivery time. They would have their list. They would go out to the truck and they would say, okay, is this what's on your truck? Yes. Before anything is allowed to be delivered, we have drain covers essentially that would be placed over the drain cover. That's the one. There's really one that's it's kind of diagonal. If you diagonal to the left from where that A is where the main one that we would be concerned about. And so we would put the drain cover there before anything is offloaded from the truck.
And you will monitor compliance with that?
Yes, yeah. So we have auditing procedures for many things, including that. So does that answer that question? Okay. Other questions?
Dave had a question. I think, was there one item on the building inspector's list? I didn't hear if it was on, if you still had enough or not. The potassium hydroxide?
Oh, sure. I apologize. So the potassium hydroxide is inside one of those, it's the pH testing buffers. So it's a basic, hydroxide kind of means basic on the pH scale. And so the pH testing buffer is used for quality control. So that's one of the components. And I think probably the building inspector went through our list that he had at that time and he picked out ones that might have been of concern to him. But if that's the one that I found. It's obviously a product name there.
Okay, so it's 13 total of these?
So there were 13 in the Weston and Sampson engineers list, and then there were 9 in the building inspector's list, but they overlap. So, and then 3 of them were removed. So it's a little algebra problem. Yeah. So the ones that remain: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Yes. And 14 if you include isopropyl alcohol, which is a household item. Okay. Right. So if it's of interest to the board, I could then go into some of our other controls that we have in place. Okay. So we have one of the most important controls that we have is obviously our buildings and our systems. So I mentioned that having designated staff that are responsible for handling of materials and waste and having them trained to know what their responsibilities are and being trained by folks that kind of are qualified to do the training, and then having auditing procedures for those standardized protocols is one control. And then, of course, having policies and procedures, which we have submitted to you in our spill prevention and response plan, as well as our EOP, emergency operations plans, really outline kind of all the detail around that. So that would be what we consider one control. We have standards and best practices about how we operate as an organization, Brigham-wide. And so we would apply those standards to the hospital, to Westwood. And then the limited quantities is so in my business we say, okay, if you can reduce or eliminate the potential hazards through quantities, then you reduce or eliminate the risk. So as I've explained, we have very low quantities of the products that we're using, so we consider that to be an important control as well. The containers that people that we use and that our vendors use to ship new materials, as I explained, are they're not spill proof, but they're pretty spill resistant and they're break resistant to reduce the likelihood that something could be released. in a material standpoint. And then on the waste side, we certainly use rigid containers with licensed waste haulers, and standardized protocols. And as you know, we're also have our DEP certification for a very small quantity generator on the waste side. So we've met all those requirements. So then engineering control. So the container types is one type of engineering control that we have. So robust containers that would resist breaking that would lead to a spill if they were dropped. That's another type of control that we have. And then the actual the spill response procedure. So having, as I mentioned, that standard protocol around covering drains. If there is before there's a spill. So I think one of the questions in the Weston and Sampson report was, okay, how are we actually preventing spills? So it would be the containers, would be the reduced quantities, but then how are we responding and having systems in place to respond? That would be, making sure that our drain covers are in place before we actually unload anything, as an example, and having that training in place. And then, though, if something, we also have the engineering controls of our drain systems. And so, with respect to the drain systems, that's an important engineering control. And I would actually defer to Howard for explanation of exactly how our drain systems are designed according to the requirements of the master plan for University Ave. I was told that you guys wanted to hear directly from Howard on this. Is that correct?
If you guys like to hear. So I'm Howard Mosier with VHB. We're the civil engineers on the project. So I was last year in 2017 as well when we were going through the first round of permitting. So real briefly, this site is part of the University Ave mixed-use development area, and there was a stormwater master plan, which required that each of the sites comply with DEP stormwater management guidelines. So in order to comply with the master plan requirements and DEP, we have a system that collects both the roof water and the surface drainage. The roof drainage is collected through piping, sent subsurface, and makes its way to a subsurface infiltration system. There's two systems. There's one in the rear of the building.
Was there a separate slide on it?
No,
I have a plan.
yeah. So the roof drainage goes out the rear, and it goes directed into a large subsurface infiltration system where it's allowed to go back in the ground, and if that fills up under extreme storms, it goes overflow. Like the rest of the University Ave area, the Not Your Average Joe's, the hotel. There was another infiltration system installed between the medical office building and the hotel. And, there's the plan. So, you had it. Get our advertising. Okay. So, in the rear, you see that big grid system. That is the subsurface infiltration system. And that is receiving the roof from the first phase of the building, what will be the second phase of the building, and also the roof of the future garage. And in the rear also, we're collecting the surface parking lot drainage. And that's collected, but before it goes to the infiltration systems, it's cleaned up by going through a water quality unit. That's the pre-treatment that's required in accordance with the DEP stormwater management guidelines. So you can see kind of from left to right, there's a solid black line in the middle of the parking. It dives down a little bit towards the rear of the parking, and then it goes to a little bit of a T. That's where the T goes into this infiltration system. If the infiltration's full, it goes on to its ultimate discharge point. In the front of the site, there's some surface drainage. There's a number of catch basins. That is all collected and diverted again through a water quality unit where it gets transferred into the infiltration system that was designed and approved as part of the hotel project and under the master plan. So these catch basins and the water quality units allow sediments and other materials to be trapped before it can migrate. So in the event of a spill, those can be cleaned out before it distributes downstream. So the sumps collect it or the water quality units collect it. So that's a brief overview. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. So we see that as one of our important engineering controls. So prevention is the primary control, but if in the low likelihood that something does hit the drains, then we have these backups to make sure that anything is captured and that we can clean it before it hits any of the surface water. So, that's the majority of what we have to present. However, we wanted to give you a chance if there are any remaining questions to kind of answer those, because we know that maybe some folks have something else to ask.
I just got a couple of questions.
Yes.
All your employees who are gonna be handling these chemicals
Yes,
are trained in the handling and use of these chemicals, correct?
correct.
You've also received from the state your Environmental Protection Bureau approval.
EPA VSQG status, correct.
That's all I have.
Yep.
Abby, did you have anything else from our peer review or for any of the, other agencies?
Just, what you had in your packet, you received a couple today, but you did circulate the application to your review staff. Received comments from Beta Group. Beta Group is your peer reviewer for University Station. And they did not have any concerns with the application. They reviewed what was submitted and believed that the application addressed all the procedures on the exterior of the building, and then they deferred to the town building and health department on the interior of the building. We did have a report from the health director that this application, or for these materials, an application still needs to be submitted to the Board of Health for under their hazardous materials bylaw,
Which we have done.
which, yeah.
The application is submitted, the fee is paid.
Okay. And then, Devon Westwood Water District did provide those comments. The Water District hired, Weston Sampson to provide that letter that you received, yesterday. And then you received today comments from the conservation agent and fire chief. None had concerns, but had recommended, some items be included, which I've included in some draft conditions for you to review. I've compiled 10 draft conditions based on the comments we received and what you've heard with this application. Much is included in the application, but other extra safeguards when you get to that point we can outline them.
Are there any other?
Yeah, most of my questions were answered through the presentation, so thank you. The only question I asked, for spill-contained pallets, do you use that for any of the?
So spill-contained pallets would be typically used if you have a small quantity generator, if you're storing a lot of waste on site. We're generating very little waste, that's why we qualify for a VSQG status. So typically you, in your waste storage area inside your building, you would have waste stored, you would have pallets. If you were storing drums, for example. The purpose of the pallet is so that it can't escape onto a porous flooring surface that could get out. So the answer is that we don't have those pallets. We could certainly get some. However, I really don't believe that there's adequate volume to justify that.
And then, are there any floor drains in the building itself?
None inside the building.
Are there any other board questions? Is there any, Abby, you were about to say something, or? No?
Yep.
Is there anyone from the public who would like to speak on this, or have a question about this? I don't see anyone. Well, thank you very much for the thorough presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time to hear us today.
Should we go through the conditions?
Yeah, Abby, did you share the conditions with them, or kind of what happened?
Yes.
Okay. Abby, do you want to walk us through that?
Sure, so, number one was the final O&M and emergency management plan be revised to include, the revisions requested by Denham Westwood Water District, which was about the container, disposal. The riprap maintenance to be included in the, maintenance log, to increase the frequency for the trash and debris removal from the rain garden to be as necessary. Currently said at least twice a year. And then 2 hard copies and an electronic copy be submitted. And maintain.
You can stay up there, you don't have to leave.
Okay.
Maintain.
Not sure what the protocol is.
Yeah, feel free to
Yeah, if there are remaining conditions, we wanna make sure that we're satisfying those.
Okay, no, please stay at the table, we're just gonna go through the conditions and, if you have any questions, jump in.
And that, two, the applicant shall register the hazardous materials with the Board of Health and re-register on a biannual basis. Number three, I had drafted, but taken out, you have that was about registration with the state, because we did receive that. So I would change number three to update the logs of the, chemical data sheets as requested by the fire department. Number four, future changes in composition or quantity shall require prior written approval with an amendment to the special permit unless determined to be de minimis. Number five, applicant shall contact health and fire for initial and subsequent inspections of the facility. Number six, applicant is responsible for obtaining any other required approvals. That's a standard condition that we typically have. Number seven, each delivery shall be inspected by trained personnel before receiving and accepting any material. Number eight, staff and delivery personnel shall be trained to handle and inspect all deliveries of hazardous material. Number nine, emergency and spill response material shall be kept in the loading and delivery area at all times. And number 10, drain covers for all storm drains shall be in place in advance of any deliveries. Or I think the applicant did comment that number 10 should say for all proximate drain covers.
Right.
You're looking for on your,
So the ones
on
that
your
could,
property.
correct, yeah. We would hope that we wouldn't be responsible for adjacent property spill covers. So, sorry, I don't know exactly what the protocol is, but of course, we're hoping to try to satisfy all conditions today. And so I'm not sure if it would be valuable for us to kind of go through and say if those are each met, or if you already know that, or,
Well, if we approve, they'll have to be there.
yeah,
on
so the
which is fine,
Right.
but,
So the conditions are more of a continuing,
okay.
you know, it's
That's not something necessarily would be have to be done before we get,
Right,
approved.
typically,
Okay.
we would approve something with a number of conditions, and I
Okay.
mean, we had like 60 conditions on the
Yeah.
special permits, and some of them are just saying this is the way it's, just to
Understood.
memorialize what the
Sure.
requirements are.
understood.
Abby, on number 2, is the intent every 6 months or every other year? I believe biennial means every 6
Biennial?
months. Or twice.
That's the health and-
Biennial means every 2 years.
Oh, okay.
Biennial means every.
That's
twice a-
typical is every 2 years. is-
Right,
Yeah.
I just wanted to,
Why
Thank
don't you
you.
change
Thank
it
you.
every 2 years?
Yeah.
It's always confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else, Dave? Do you want to move forward? Okay. So I find that the proposal complies with section 9.7 of the zoning bylaw and will not pose any adverse impact by appropriately addressing potential spills and contamination prior to reaching the public water supply, and as further conditioned by this approval. Therefore, I move to approve the special permit as requested by Brigham and Women with the conditions stated immediately prior.
Second?
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All those, any opposed? No? The motion passes and the approval is granted. This is a public hearing, so I need a motion to close the public hearing.
A motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
A motion is second. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. The public hearing is closed.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yep. Have the wrap.
All right.
I'll check it out. Yeah. I'll get it over to
So the next item on the agenda is 736 High Street, Stagecoach Cross. Public hearing for EIDR for parking and landscape improvements. This is for the Starbucks.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. I'm Michael Terry from Fidel and Maria, represent the property owner. I'm here with Jim Susi is engineer with United Consultants. And I believe we have a plan for you. So, yeah, this is the Starbucks building, as you may recall. If you remember last time before you, there's some mention of my being on the board at the time this was last addressed. So Abby was kind enough to help me. We did some research and discovered that I had actually moved off the board before the matter was opened and addressed before the board. Okay. Anyways, we had the Starbucks property. There was some work that was done in 2004, I believe, to the rear of the building. That triggered an EIDR, or site review, process that hadn't been done in advance. So a process was started and then withdrawn. Kind of fell through the cracks. Nobody really noticed. Life went on for a number of years, and then recently Ken Fiscaldo, a local resident, was complaining about parking. Abby noticed that the EIDR had never been completed. So I consulted with the owners, and as I discussed with you last time, really what they want to do is redevelop the whole property, the whole site. It's due. But after the hearing, the board and Abby relayed to us that they wanted to address the illegal parking on the lower corner there immediately. So we put up some temporary signs, which have had some impact. I can't say it's 100%, but what we have proposed with this plan is to put a landscape area by that second driveway. And Jim here can tell you about details of the plan if you like, but what we're showing there is a timber rail, 6-inch curb, and then 3-foot plantings behind it. And we're pretty confident that will keep people out of those two spots. It also has the benefit of matching the other landscape areas, which are built in a similar fashion. I saw some comments that Abby sent us just saying we really haven't had time to absorb those. But this is what we're proposing. And Mr. Susi is here if you have any particular questions about the engineering involved with that.
Well, I think that this addresses one of the things that we brought up last time, and I've observed the no parking signs and how effective they are or not, whatever. That's I think the larger concern that people keep raising is the overall traffic challenges around this, and I was hoping that you could suggest some ideas for how to address that, because what I observed is people double parking. You have the 2 spaces there, but you have people pull in, double park, go in, get their coffee. And I sat there on Saturday morning for 15 minutes and saw 3 people do that and 1 person park in the not parking. And I was hoping that there's something that can be done here to what are the other options? I wanted to hear something creative about how this could be solve the bigger problem.
Well, I'm not an engineer, but I think he's got some limiting factors here. One of them is that the building is all the way to one side, so there's no traffic flow. It's essentially only one way in, one way out. Really, to address questions like that, what you're talking about is changing the entire flow of the property. So you'd move the building to the center, pull it up, let people loop in and out, so they're not double parking. And in fact, you make it impossible for them to double park. Right now, you can put up a sign, you can stripe it, you can say stop doing that, but people say, "Oh, I'm just here for a second," then run in, then run out. Human nature being what it is. And the other point, it's not perfect, but it's been working for a long time without huge problems. It's not adding any traffic to 109. The traffic that goes in there is already in the flow of 109. It doesn't generate any new car travels, trips anywhere. So I think that's worth noting. We don't have any ingenious plans to prevent people from doing what they do. I think it's a good idea to block off the 2 spots. It's really impossible for them to park there. That works. Other than blocking off another section of the drive, I don't know how you prevent them from doing that. and I don't think that would be feasible or wise. As far as the landscape area itself goes, Abby said she was looking for granite or concrete, and I've discussed that with the property owners. I mean, they'll do that if push comes to shove, but they'd prefer that it be the timber, especially if you want it done in 14 days, as Abby has said in her notes. If you're gonna go with granite curbing or concrete, it's gonna take longer. We gotta get a contractor to do it. We have to dig up the area, put in a footing, etc. It's 14 days is probably not gonna happen. The other benefit of timber is if there's damage with a plow, it's quick and easy to fix. You know, you chip off a piece of granite, then it's expensive and it's a big deal to replace. Items, you know, factors like that come into play.
Have you thought about reconfiguring these two parking spaces or kind of blocking them off in some way, or what could be done with that area?
Well, I suppose you could eliminate them. Let me ask Jim. Jim, how many parking spaces are on the site and how many are required?
I believe if you scroll that up a little bit, I have a chart at the bottom. Okay, so basically, if you go through the calculations, there's 18 spaces that are required based on the uses, and we have 24 spaces on site, so we've actually got 6 more than would be required.
So I suppose if you wanted to do that, what you would do is eliminate them. I'm not sure that would stop people from.
Well, what is the concern? The problem is people double parking behind these two spots once they're full? Is that?
Right, so what will happen is the person will stop right here.
Yeah.
Pull in here, stop here, and then the cars
Back
up on High Street.
Okay.
Plus you've got people who are, and this is what you see on like Saturday morning, but you know, there's a lot of kids from high school, middle school will be coming down here and stuff, so you end up with kind of a cluster of activity
Right.
in here.
And, okay, so from what I see from that is that you eliminate these spots, you're not gonna eliminate that problem. People are still gonna pull up front here and try to park there. It's human nature.
Right.
That's what we're dealing with. There's no parking plan or traffic flow that's gonna eliminate human nature. I'm only gonna be a second. I don't wanna pull in the back and park.
Right.
Nothing we can do is gonna change it.
I think the only thing
The
that
way
would-
it exists right now.
The only thing that would change it is pulling the building up and making that impossible, making everyone go in the back.
And maybe that's in the future.
Physical impediments will change, not restriping.
Right.
People know, if you have an asphalt pad, they're gonna find a way to park there.
Absolutely.
Because they're already doing it.
Right.
Lines painted don't mean anything to them unless they get a ticket.
That applies to someone else, it's for other people.
So you could bring up more timbers and put them in those 2 parking spaces, but you know what they're gonna do? They're just gonna move closer to the building. They don't care what they do to the people behind them. They truly don't, because they don't think they're a problem. So it is a problem going up onto High Street. If it was just relegated to the parking lot, it's just a bad business. But it's not. It goes out and migrates into High Street at times. And
Have you observed that? Because I've not observed that.
I've seen it. I don't even.
Waiting for cars to turn in.
Yeah.
I've seen that. I've seen
Well, that
some-
backs up, that
All it
backs
takes
up
is
one
2
of them.
cars. Someone who doesn't want to go to the back, they sit and wait, hoping.
Spot opens up.
Yeah, I want to see those backup lights turn on before I get 3 cars honking at me to fully pull in. So it's not that there are 8 cars waiting to pull in. It just takes 1.
Well, what I would observe is the person would be sitting here with the lights on, the car running, and they go in for 3 minutes to get their car.
Yeah,
So
right.
that's the person who then sit here in the entrance.
Right, they sit there and wait. I would wait for my turn to park illegally.
So you're using it as a drive-through.
Right.
And unfortunately, it's only a drive-through that can only handle 2 cars and out here. I haven't seen it like continually backed up, but it creates this.
I've been backed up 3
Balance.
cars just
Yeah.
waiting, and I'm not saying I'm waiting for half an hour. I'm not even waiting for 10 minutes, but you do hit brakes because you're waiting for somebody to wait to complete their turn into Starbucks. That's what I've observed. And I frankly haven't seen anything that will solve that. thus far. I like the first attempt with the
Yeah, I think
planting, but I don't think it's gonna ultimately solve what we're seeing.
No, I mean, it addresses the one obvious problem that was raised.
Parking right next to there,
Yeah.
right next to the exit.
Right.
And we can also go the law enforcement route. These people start getting tickets for this, they're gonna stop doing it. It's getting the regulars that do it. But it's, person who's the first time doing it, that's always gonna happen. But if you've got repeat offenders every day, the same person doing the same thing, he gets a ticket or two, he's gonna stop doing it.
What is the protocol for that, for having a police officer getting
On
a
private
parking
property.
ticket on a private commercial space?
I don't know they
I
have
think
jurisdiction.
there might get a little
to do that.
pushback from the police department.
If it's impeding traffic on 109,
One
it's
thing
now
I
a
have-
public safety issue.
What
Yeah.
what about the areas to the right of the building where it says landscapes and landscape area?
right, like that's.
I know it's a handicap spot, that's the only one listed there, right?
The handicap
Yeah.
spot is
Yeah.
here, then there's a walkway, and then this is, I don't know.
Is there a maybe creative way we can make it an in and an out instead of, I see spots carrying over into that area, it looks on paper to be a bad use of space.
It's an improvement from what was originally approved, I can tell you that much.
Well, if we're looking for, we have one lane kind of going back and coming out. I mean, effectively, I know it may not be it by measurement, but I'm just wondering if those spaces are the best use of that space. Is there a way we can make it come out so it makes it easier for people to go back? I don't know if that's the reason they're not going back, or if it's truly they hate walking. I don't know.
Well, like if this was angled, if this was angle parking, and then if this area out here was like an outdoor seating area, so that you had a smaller way to, it wasn't a big open space. Well, that's an idea, but I mean, really, it needs to, move the building over so that you can get
Yeah, I
around
wasn't.
it.
I mean, yeah, once you move the building or start a new building, you can do a whole lot.
Exactly.
Right.
But I understand you don't want to go to that extreme.
Well, I think they do, but,
Well, if
you
they
can
do,
have
then
14
great.
days. It's gonna take some time.
You can knock it down in a day.
Oh, well, that is for sure. And yeah, I don't know, my clients, so these are Salvatore brothers, I mean, they own a lot of properties in town, they're good commercial citizens. They understand, the traffic's has been a problem, but on the other hand, like they tell me all the time, the mice have figured it out. That even though there might be some backup on certain times of day, they do get in and out, people don't get hurt, it actually kind of works. But they recognize that with some redevelopment, it could be much better, and that's what they'd like to do. But in the meantime, we don't want to, leave that one condition that we had unattended to. So we'd like to, with your permission, at least improve the situation marginally, and then come back with a new redevelopment plan. That's our thought.
And what are the stormwater issues on site?
I'm not aware of what they are precisely, and I'm not aware of any big drainage problems there. It's probably not fully in compliance with the current regs, but it's, nothing about that building really is.
There really isn't any drainage on site. I mean, we don't have enough to know right now, but I did speak with Phil Beta, your on-call town engineer, and he recommended some stormwater improvements, but at least he recommended the application be revised to at least include an evaluation. He thought it would be possible to at least infiltrate or treat the roof runoff. 'Cause I think right now there's a catch basin on the street, so I think it's flowing off the property into the street untreated. So that would be, staff's recommendation is for some basic upgrades to the stormwater for redevelopment properties. So the existing site, but back in 2005, the last hearing, the last time this was before you, that was one of the concerns then, was trying to improve the stormwater. So nothing's changed since then, but we think it's it's something.
Jim, what would a roof
Yes.
recharge entail on that site?
For that site, it'd be an underground, recharge area with an overflow tying into that catch basin out in the street. To just handle the roof and get that, directed into downspouts into the thing would be one thing. To try to address the whole site, you'd probably be looking at shutting the place down for a couple of weeks, because you'd have to tear up the whole front parking lot to put in a recharge size to handle that much. Just something to handle the roof recharge. We may be able to get it in a smaller area, so that way at least the place could stay open, would only have a small area that would be blocked off, taking care of the roof recharge for that. It's manageable.
Yeah. I certainly recommend that they look at something like that, do some stormwater mitigation. And I'm not sure, this site's, it's an old site. I'm not sure that it's worth all the money to go through a big expense of redoing all the stormwater, tearing the whole place up, if you're gonna replace the building a year or two down the road anyways. Just thinking common sense.
What's the time frame of their thought of replacing the building?
In the pipeline, I would say, not 14 days, but within a year. I think that they're looking at it very seriously.
So it sounds like, what I'm thinking is that we have some immediate changes that we done. I'm hesitant to just approve everything, because it feels like it's been years, and but maybe do the stuff that, a couple of things here that are outlined, but if there's a plan for something bigger, then this is an opportunity to, just get behind that and fix a lot of these issues. We're not gonna fix them tonight.
Right. Well, we gotta figure out a way to tie it all together to incentivize the replacement of the building,
Uh-huh.
but not to let it sit and go forward
Forever.
without nothing happening. That's the
Understood.
trick.
Right.
The other interesting thing is that, across the street on the weekends, there are many off hours, there's tons of parking across the street. And so people, like I would say, oh, this lot is a mess, so I'll just park over there, and then I will proceed to jaywalk across. And this is, again.
You mean you don't walk down at the crosswalk and walk
Yeah,
across?
right. No, it's like, that's always.
So you're saying we need to build a pedestrian bridge? Is that what
I'm
you're
saying
saying?
that there's a solution that I don't know who all does each part of it, but there's opportunity for a solution here, probably by moving the building. Maybe there's something else that can be done with other properties around there, but again, it's not gonna be like the seventh condition of our thing here. Oh, and by the way, build a crosswalk with lights but it's something to think about for what can be done in the future. Is there some way to make this a pedestrian-friendly situation?
Abby, do you know how that process works for requesting another crosswalk? Is that a planning board, or is that a public safety process?
I think it would be a board of selectmen as a road commissioners.
Yeah.
Wouldn't you need permission from the other landowners though to park across the street?
Yes, we do have a section in our bylaw about shared parking, I believe. So I think that's a special permit. So we have a section in our zoning bylaw specific to shared parking, and that's through a special permit from you, the planning board. So that would be an additional application. And there needs to be a safe pedestrian crossing between the sites. That was done across the street at the Camellas. They have their employees parking at the property next door, the office building. There's a parking lot in the back, so that was a special permit from the planning board a couple of years ago. And they have a stairway connection. I think that's,
I can't see the selectmen okaying a crosswalk at this point. It's not as, it would catch drivers off guard and it'd be more of a danger than than a
Yes.
solution.
And for this business, I don't see people
No.
going through that.
It's a farther walk, it looks like, than if you're parked behind the building.
Exactly.
So, I don't see that as being a solution to this, reasonable. I'd be curious to see how many times we have 8 cars double parked in front and still spots in the back available. Just curious I haven't documented that personally.
Right, there's a sort of a gamble you gotta make, right, to see if you wanna go back and see if there's a space and then.
I know,
So
it's,
A lot easier just to hop out
I
and,
know.
right.
That's why I said, just be
Is
curious.
the issue that the back parking lot fills up and that there's no parking left on the side?
I don't think it is. No, I think people are just lazy.
People actually park in my lot, excuse me, I'm Wayne Zarka, 738 High Street. And people often, Starbucks customers are parking in my parking lot, walking across when the back parking lot is empty. So I've been having an ongoing problem with Starbucks parking in my lot, which is adversely affecting my business.
Why don't we, if there's no other board member comments, we'd like to hear from the public, and if you wanna say any more.
My name is Wayne Zarka, I own Westwood Eye Care and Optical, and I own the building at 738 High Street. And I do have a couple concerns and a couple questions. One is, I just specified, a lot of times Starbucks people are parking in my parking lot, and it's not a quick run-in. They'll be in there for 45, 50 minutes, an hour sometimes, and it does adversely affect my business. I have a very nice note that I stick on the windshield asking them, please don't do this, but it's repetitive, and it's ongoing, and it's a problem. The bushes, Michael, that the
Yep.
shrubbery that you're gonna put in, how high is that gonna be? Because that has the potential to block my sign coming up High Street. So if it's low, it's not a problem.
They're talking about 3-foot bushes.
If these bushes start growing, then my sign's gone. So I'd be very concerned about that as well. I don't think Starbucks has any signage on the building letting customers know that there is parking in the rear. I would advise that they put up some type of signage that at least tells people, yes, there's parking back there. Because most of the time with the double parking and the parking in my lot, I look out my window and their back parking lot is wide open. Plenty of spaces. They're good neighbors. I know the Salvatore brothers, so nothing against them. But when they had other properties available, I asked them if they could move Starbucks to one of their other properties, and that didn't go over so well. But I thought it was a good idea.
There is another tenant behind Starbucks, right?
There's a small real estate office.
I think a lot of people presume that parking is for them, for the real estate office.
I agree with
So they go, instead of parking in front of that business, erroneously, they park in front of Mr. Zaka's business, erroneously.
I'm sure she probably doesn't make any appointments during the morning rush hour.
Yeah, I think signage is always a good start. It's usually the cheapest way, and you never know.
Maybe an educational program with the Starbucks customers would be a good idea.
I mean, I know when we looked at the traffic flow through that gas station in Islington a couple of years ago, we talked a lot about having arrows and signage kind of things to say this is the way you're supposed to go through. I guess you don't have issues with people turning in the wrong side, do you? It's pretty
No,
clear that you would no one would turn in that way.
No.
Because everything's facing
I
there.
haven't seen that.
But I think it's the sort of using this as a pickup thing.
Yeah, I don't know, no parking, no temporary, no standing. I don't know what you put there just to get people not to do what they're doing. I don't know how you do it.
All right, so what are our options here
Well,
tonight?
sign-wise, a sign here that just say parking in the rear, and then we have maybe right on the building, larger signs, no live parking.
Yes.
How about no parking next door?
Yeah. I didn't know that people were doing that.
Oh, it's been an ongoing problem.
So that could be, I mean, a sign, please.
Just no live parking.
So, as the driveway comes in and heads to the rear, you're saying like one sign right in the corner
So
of the
right where the
building?
sign is here, just say parking in the rear.
Well, I was thinking if you go up a little bit, like where that white fence is on the right-hand side.
Yeah.
One sign there and then one sign directly across in front of the building.
I don't
It
know.
says additional,
Do you guys own the fence?
yeah, the fence is on our, well, it's right on the property line. But I mean, the sign could definitely be on, you know, foot or two off the fence, and then maybe another one right in the corner, the little landscape strip that's in the front of the building that says additional parking in rear.
Right.
Yeah.
Could I suggest something you consider to help Mr. Zaka? If you own the fence on that side, maybe put another one up there, because if people have to walk down by the road to go around the fence,
Right, that's gonna
That's
take
no
away
longer
the
appealing.
appeal of the parking next
That's
to
another
it.
5 seconds of walking.
yeah,
Forget it.
and you
It's too
just, right, and you just lost them. They can't walk a straight shot. I won't suggest the moat idea, I was
With the alligators.
Just plant some poison ivy.
Yeah.
it's a long-term education.
Alright, so whatever, we have, kind of options here tonight in terms of we could approve things, we could ask them to come back in a month with, do the immediate things and come back with, a final.
Right, I recommend approving this application either now and then a future application when ready be submitted. If we're talking about a more comprehensive one about, you know, new construction, that we come back to you when, it's ready. I think this is a long outstanding, violation, this parking lot, the site plan review, the EIDR was never approved, and it's time to approve it now that you have an application in front of you. So either, if you're ready to approve it tonight, or continue it to, in about a month, your November meeting, with your specific request of what you'd like to see incorporated. I recommend some stormwater improvements, at least trying to infiltrate that, infiltrate the roof runoff. And I would recommend something more substantial than the timber curb, because I don't think that would last very long, so. Some kind of curb and the dense landscaping so that cars can't go over that curb in that front parking area.
But as we learned, we do need to be sensitive to signage of the neighbor.
I think it is set back a little bit, from,
Just don't wanna create a second problem, but
Right.
solve them first.
So,
So what are the conditions that were?
Well, the condition is signage.
So two signs that notes the parking in rear.
Well, yeah, just obvious signage, the parking in the rear, additional parking in the rear, and obvious signing in the front of no live parking, no double parking.
I think even just posting a sign on the door, I mean, I know signs don't change behavior, but there's a certain amount of, setting the norm here. I don't think it's, right now, everybody just looks out there and laughs at it and says, oh, there's another person.
Right, maybe denial of service.
No coffee for
No
you.
coffee for you, absolutely fine.
Alright, so with the conditions that you had here, Abby, I think I'm agreeing with the concrete, or a more permanent curbing solution. The bike rack, I would just say, like, in general, you want the bike rack to be close to the business, but it's what is it, like 10 feet away, so.
Yeah.
As long as it's,
And we'll have, you know, the racks that are chosen will be compliant with your regulations.
we incorporate these sign recommendations into the conditions here.
But we don't have the actual, I mean, we don't have a plan for signage, we're just asking them to put up signs.
right,
I mean, we've kind of generally gestured to where it would go, but typically we would get an actual location for the plan.
Could we,
To make
could
sure.
we add those to the plan and send that to you for the okay?
I think that's, I guess, the question for the board. Are you looking to, are you going to, are you requesting this to be shown on a revised plan at a continued hearing, or are you looking to?
Well, you can, I think we can give you the authority to approve the revised plan.
The stormwater is the hard part. We don't have If you,
Well, are we gonna order stormwater?
right, that's up to you. They submitted a request to waive the drainage requirement, so they did not submit a plan to you that is showing any drainage. Staff's recommendation is to not waive that and to at
Roof
least
runoff filtration?
provide some
Just the roof
evaluation.
runoff, not
Yeah.
not the site.
That was the initial comments from Phil, but he doesn't have anything really to review.
Right.
So that was his
So
initial
if you're gonna require that, why don't you let us come back with the compliant plan? That
Yeah,
shows that,
yeah, 'cause
shows
right now
that-
we're just gonna
We
approve
can see you again in
the
November.
window, yeah.
And in the meantime, take care of the curbing and the
You
planting.
could do that right away.
Yeah.
Or,
Yeah.
That seems reasonable.
So you could
I
keep
think.
your hearing.
I hate to
so
keep
you
dragging
the
this on,
hearing
but-
open.
Right, but it's, this
We're
is,
not at a
gives
solution yet.
gives a chance to get some changes out there and see how people react to it as well.
Yeah.
See how it, maybe all the traffic problems will just go away.
yeah, I have a magic wand.
I do think it's a traffic flow issue. It's not that we need tons of additional parking, because it's more about getting people to use what's there and not having the in and out problem.
I'm gonna talk to my client about working, maybe we'll have a sit down with Starbucks and work on a re-education program for customers and see if they can push that, maybe we'll have some impact, you never know. Especially if they're regulars, coming in every,
Well, either way, I mean, they have to be responsible for their parking lot.
yeah, they should be.
you know?
All right, so then.
So I'll make a motion to continue the hearing until November 27th. At 7 PM at 50 Carvey Street to allow time for the applicant to resubmit, revised plans to include stormwater improvements, revised curbing, bike racks, signage, and planting details.
Are we meeting at Canby Street then?
Yes.
Yeah, right. Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
One
Opposed?
quick question.
Sure.
Is when would you need plans to be submitted to you before the 27th?
I mean, it depends on the proposal, and so I would say usually 2 weeks before, because given the holidays,
Yeah.
Yeah.
the 27th is the Tuesday after Thanksgiving. So
Right.
if you could aim for 2 weeks before. So that would be for a revised plan that incorporates the stormwater management for you to review. And then if we could just clarify for the board, do you want them to get started on the front area? And then
Yes.
what kind of curb did the board agree on?
Concrete?
I mean,
What
your
you-
concern was permanency?
Or something more substantial than the timber?
Then the timber, so we can go with asphalt? Or concrete?
It's concrete or granite.
I mean, that was my suggestion. but maybe
Question,
something-
as far as that goes, again, to try to implement it quicker, instead of using concrete curbing per se, if we were to get the precast concrete parking bumpers and make the curb out of those pinned in the ground,
How high are those?
6 inches.
Same as the timber.
Same as the curb would be, but that could be implemented quicker and with less disturbance to the business, because they could just be placed pinned into the ground. The backside could be loomed and the plants planted all within, a day or two at most, where if we had to do concrete or granite curb, now you're talking about getting a mini excavator out there. First of all, finding a contract that'll come out for 25 feet of curb. Then the mini excavator to get everything done, which in essence is gonna block that exit out of the parking lot to do it.
How long are those sections?
They're typically
6 feet?
6 foot, same as the timbers that we had
So you got
proposed.
timbers or
I don't know that.
the end stops for
I don't see
parking
the difference
spaces.
really between the timbers and those. I mean, I know they'd be a little more permanent, but they're not gonna look any more
They'll look.
permanent.
Well,
I'd rather, if you can see your way clear, keep it with timber so it matches the other side of the building. And, I mean, if there's damage to them, if they're not permanent, you pop it off and you pop another one back on, and it's very easy. I mean, they're 6 inches high, it's not like you're gonna roll over and park into the planting
Right,
area.
right, I'm also
That's the
thinking,
hope, if that
we're
happens.
talking about like a 1 year
Right.
thing.
Yeah.
We definitely, it's not the time to create a beautiful granite wall. It's torn down in here.
Yeah, that's my,
And
that's
I'm
my
not, I'm also
underlying.
thinking those concrete, car stops, you know,
It may
It's
or
not
may-
attractive.
May or may not be
Yeah,
a
I
year,
wouldn't
that's
think
the
so.
thing.
Yeah. I'm okay with the timbers for now.
Yeah.
Again, we need to figure out a way to tie this all together, that going forward, if we do not have a new relocated building,
Then we gotta look at it
then we'll have to
again.
revisit these things down the
Understood,
road.
and look, we're happy to work with you on this.
You're gonna tear up the, like, you're gonna remove the asphalt from this area and have plantings and everything, you're not just gonna dump loam on top of it,
No, behind the,
behind
the curb, the asphalt would have to be, otherwise the shrubs.
We'll just
Yeah,
stop.
so you gotta excavate that anyway, and then it's.
I don't know
a question of what to
if we
put.
should have them move forward with doing this work without seeing what it's actually gonna look like on. I mean, to wait a month,
Well, no, I think it's, if
Because
they
once
could
they-
do this now.
if they move forward with the timber, then that's it, that's your,
Right,
that's your
but the
solution.
timber's gonna include the landscaping behind it.
In the, yes, I would recommend the dense shrubs planted close behind that curve to add
Right.
another
But
layer.
right now you have a nice curve going on it, but it won't look like that with the timbers. Or will it?
I
Just cut them.
laid them out in 6-foot segments and mited it around, so
Okay.
it would be true.
Yeah, just wanna, if it's gonna follow that plan that you submitted.
Well, yeah,
We
that
can,
is the
we
plan,
can
that's what
stake
they
out the
have.
line.
But it's not the approved plan, we just said to.
Well, that's what we're approving
This is what we're
tonight.
Well,
approving tonight.
The reason it's,
Or not.
it does curve because it's in smaller sections, I think, here, like it's, what I wanna see is, you know, when we have the next meeting, we'll have a plan for addressing stormwater things, maybe there'll be some other ideas that come up between now and then, and we'll be able to go on site and see already these improvements that we've identified tonight in place, and we'll have people who are, we'll be able to observe what's happening with the morning traffic and all
Right.
there, so I think that's kind of this will get us to cause something to happen right away versus just another drawing, you
Yeah,
know?
I'm okay
Well, I
with
think
that.
this, once this goes up, the behavior's gonna change. I think we're still gonna have a problem with double parking, but again, if we can follow that up with the employees of the store,
Yeah,
we might have a, you know,
we're
at
getting
least
some,
for
we're
now,
getting somewhere.
we're getting somewhere,
Yeah,
exactly.
exactly.
I'm okay with that.
All right,
Alright,
so,
if we're already,
we already made the
So
motion, we're all
So it
set?
sounds like you can get started on what the planning board will review in its final form at their November
Correct.
27th.
Very good.
We just need for, roof filtration.
Recharge.
Did everyone
First and a second.
vote, because I think we kind of had an interruption, was there
I
any?
don't even remember if we voted.
Well, you had a first,
We did vote, didn't
you
we?
put a first and a second.
Oh, we didn't have a vote? Very good.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Thank you.
Good
Any
catch.
abstentions? Okay.
Thanks for your time, guys.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, the next item on the agenda, comprehensive plan
We've had this meeting before. Not since I've been here.
So the
We almost did.
update is that we received 21 applications for the steering committee. So we gave the 21 applicants to the Board of Selectmen at their meeting last week on October 15th. So they basically received the applications, they're reviewing them, and they're expected to continue and review and hopefully appoint at their next meeting on November. Sure. And then we were hoping right after that to have the first steering committee meeting. So we received, you know, a wide group of applicants with different interests. So they were reviewing who selected what section they wanted to work in, and then so they'll probably look at that and look to assign specific people to a section. So we have the 21 applications. So that will be at their November 5th meeting. That's also the meeting I'd like. We'd like to have the joint meeting for the planning board associates. So we have two items that we'd like to do.
That's Monday, Monday, November 5th.
Monday, because Tuesday's the election.
And are they still entertaining the idea of taking applicants late?
I
Or
don't think, no.
doors shut,
Right,
windows
yeah,
shut?
'cause they received 21.
Okay.
There was a couple that were missing some information, so they asked everyone to make sure they have everything in for the final review so that they can make appointments on November 5th.
And the plan is still for planning board members to be liaisons, so to speak?
Yes, so I know you had specific sections that you chose, I think back at your August meeting, I have those all written down.
A review of that would be helpful.
Yeah, so I'm thinking
I don't remember
I was-
how that played out.
So the idea behind the liaisons is you wouldn't be official members of the committee, but, of the steering committee, but you, have a special interest in those, specific sections that you're liaisons to, so you would be available to help guide the steering committee members in, if they had questions and where to go and who to contact. But then you would be, trying to stay involved and attend those meetings that are focused on, those sections.
But we're not official members of the
Not
committee.
official members of the steering committee. I think, and that's what we've been recommending for other boards and committees in town. Some of them have asked about, being on the steering committee, and we recommend we recommend all residents to stay involved throughout the process and attend various meetings, but other boards and committees, they could appoint a liaison from their board or committee that would, keep the rest of their committees informed.
Yeah, I mean, it's great we have people that volunteered for the steering part of it. There's lots of committees, I mean, there's things like the housing, all that's going on with housing, there's the open space thing, there's the pedestrian bike committee, people are probably gonna be very interested in transportation. I think it's all back to, we're not official members of this committee, but it's all a consensus process. So, I mean, there's not gonna be like the committee gets together and votes some controversial thing. It has to be, I think we play a role by saying, have you thought about this, have you considered that, and then the other groups and all, just everything trying to keep a consensus approach to things.
Right, I would think, we'd like to have the first meeting of the steering committee in November, so they could get started before the holidays. And the first meeting would be really, logistics and going over their, work plan. But the steering committee's members, their primary role is to write a section of the plan, and perform the legwork of, the public outreach, the engagement. They'll be responsible for, outreach and interviews of stakeholders and holding, informational meetings, focus group interviews, or going to the housing partnership or, other related, committee meetings for input. So they're seeking resident input for comments so that they can compile the first draft of the section, that will ultimately come before you, the planning board.
So each individual committee is gonna handle their own outreach? And
Yes.
they're gonna have their own forums?
Yes, well, we're thinking one large townwide vision session, to talk about all the issues, but then there would be, for example, we might have 2 members on the housing section, so they would, be directed to, do whatever they need to do, to update the housing section. So they'd be encouraged to contact the housing partnership, the affordable, WAHA and, housing authority, stay involved about the, upcoming, housing production plan, so they would, rely on that in that upcoming vision session in November. Been trying to tell people about as well. But they'll have a lot of
That's the
recent
13th. When are we going to have our first, the first general forum with all the different committee members?
The first steering committee kickoff meeting would like to be in November,
Before
before
or
the
after?
holidays.
Before or after the housing?
After. It
After.
would be after. I'm looking at some dates. I have to, find some dates afterwards.
Are you still thinking a consultant for the public
Oh yes, and I
facilitation?
am working on, and we'll get out very soon, a RFP for a consultant for the public engagement, public facilitation. That's what we need. So that's why they won't be doing the writing, but they'll be helping with the facilitating the public meetings. So I need to get that over very soon. so we can.
So it seems that at a minimum, we each need to really bone up on our two sections of the existing master plan and comprehensive plan, so that we really do understand where the town wanted to go in 2000 and how, and that, because that's what they're starting with, right?
So my goal is for the first steering committee or the full committee to come with, at least they'll have the 2000 section of the plan to each of the steering committee members with a red line version of updates on what's changed or
Statistics.
what was completed, what wasn't completed, and what's to take another look at, is it relevant or not? And then they'll work on updating the section. I mean, each section is about 2 to 5 pages, so they'll be working on with the new information. So they'll have that, the goal is for me to have that ready for them at the first meeting in mid-November, mid to late November.
Will we get the information first, or?
The red line version?
Yeah.
I'll try to get it out to everyone else, probably the steering committee members, and then ideally I would give them a full contact list of, myself, staff, and you as liaisons and any other board or commission liaisons. For example, I know the recreation commission assigned a liaison that will stay involved in the open space and community facilities portion.
And then they'll bring that section to a planning board meeting, right? Like there'll be
An updated one, yeah. So that they'll update it after. I would think the first task they're going to work on and that we're going to try to do would be a survey, a new survey, and then a vision session, a big one. We would aim for the winter, probably late January, early February.
So does would they come to us after the vision session?
Yes.
So the first time we'll hear, and basically we'd hear a report from the subcommittee, the steering committee.
Right, so I was thinking in the winter, the steering committee would be working on updating their sections, doing the outreach, getting the information, writing the updates, and it would likely be spring when they come to you. We'd start, I would take a look at the schedule, I would try to time it around town meeting, probably end of March is when usually the public hearings for town meeting conclude. So I'd probably look for April, May, June scheduling planning board meetings that would focus on specific sections. So that's when the steering committee members would be invited to your meetings. So we might have to schedule some.
Our liaison
meetings.
role is like to be a part of that process early enough, because what we want to avoid is just having a presentation where we all have tons of questions that are, nobody thought of before. We want to have it be that the liaison has worked with the group there to anticipate things, and so by the time when it comes to the planning board, it's like, great, I'm glad, okay, you thought about this, yep, there it is, and that kind of a thing.
Well, yeah, and there are things that as a liaison, you are expected to help with in terms of, like, oh, we wanna do this, yeah, but the zoning doesn't allow for that. So we only have to address this through zoning, not just, like, the FMUOD was a result of the master plan. It allowed for different types of planned growth with commercial and the mixed use and things like that. It was allowed for it only because we changed the zoning. So those types of things are how you can, as the liaison, facilitate the writing of all these sections. Some don't require any zoning, or very little zoning, input, but others, housing or economic development, a lot of them may have to do with zoning. So you don't want them to go so far on the left field, then I pull it back. You guys are talking about doing something that has nothing to do with the comprehensive plan. So you gotta kind of keep them on track in that regard.
Right, I'm thinking the role of the planning board and you as liaisons on the planning board is you want to remain engaged and be involved, aware of what's going on with the steering committee, but give the steering committee room to do the work, and then they'll move forward.
And if you have questions, ask Abby. If this is
We'll
what we're
have-
talking about. It doesn't seem right. Are we on the right track here?
Yeah, and each section will have staff to help them. For example, open space and recreation will work closely with the recreation staff. director.
All right, great, so we are moving. Now, do you have any other, no, do you want to comments to make?
Nadia Salvador Fabrizio, 32 Webster Street. I have a couple of questions. As far as the FMUODs and the comprehensive master plan that we have from 2000, I think it's highly debatable that the FMUOD districts came about because of the master plan. My second question is, you say that the town is looking for 2 individuals to be on each topic for the steering committee, each topic of the comprehensive plan. They will get the 2000 master plan, and they will also get a red line version that they will be working from. My first question is, where is the red line version coming from? I would imagine, and I guess I shouldn't suppose, that staff is updating numbers and information. Will there be footnotes where this updated information came from? And will the general public also be able to get a copy of the red line version that's being given to each of the 2 people that are on the steering committee?
Yes, I have a lot to do, but I intend to, it's gonna be just like the planning board meeting, they're gonna get an electronic packet, they're gonna have everything, I still have to write this, I'm going to do it. I'll probably be up on the whole night
I think
before,
we'll
but
get
it'll.
your Starbucks gift certificates.
But I think if we set them up, set them up like,
We're setting them up in the IQM packet that we have, so I will get it all on the website, and there'll be the meeting notification, the electronic packet, just as the planning board has. You can access the planning board's packet, right? Where you receive the information, it goes out by email, and then you click on the plans and application.
Okay, sometimes I click on the packet information and the document, very infrequently, but a document doesn't come
We'll
up.
make
And
sure
I
that's
just wanna
there.
confirm that I already have a copy of the 2000 master plan. And I would like to confirm that whatever the red line version of the updates to date, I would like a copy of that. And I have no intention on being on the steering committee, but I wanna stay involved with what's going on. But I also, with that red line updated version, will it contain footnotes from each staff member who's responsible for updating a certain portion of the master plan? Because I like to look, I need proof.
what kinds of
Like
information?
guidance.
Well,
The red line version is merely gonna be, you take the 2000 master plan, and then they're gonna tell you what was implemented, what was not implemented, what was changed in any way, shape, or form along the line. Maybe laws have changed, regulation has changed, and that's what the red line version is gonna be. Nobody has to take ownership of where it came from. It's merely a guiding form to explain where we were, where we are now, and what transpired in between.
with all due respect, I think that it's important that if you say we, had 5,123 single-family homes in Westwood, and today we have, 5,040, I'd like a footnote of where the person that updated that figure got that information, whether it's from the assessor's office or the census or wherever it comes from. I think that just giving someone a plan and a task to update information, I'm curious where this updated information is coming from.
I think it's,
When you read something, there's a footnote that's directing you to where the evidence is of this update. And I'd like to see that for one, and I don't think I'm the only one.
I think it's totally reasonable that these documents, when they reference data, they'll have to say the source. It wouldn't be that you just write and say, there's been, hundreds of people doing what, it's like it's just basic,
But that's all that's all the red line is, as Mike
Yes.
said.
So
We're updating numbers and updating developments, that have been built in Westwood.
And again, with all due respect, that's not what a red line is. I've done many red lines in my professional life, and when I change something and redline it, I make a notation, this is the reference where I got the information from to make this update. That's what a real red line is. Not just something crossing, putting a red line through and saying, well, this is what it is now. It's just, that's not the way it works.
We would agree that the data needs to be sourced and cited. I mean, if there's a change, you know, if you change the word "the" to "a," then there's a red line through that. I mean, that's just a technical sort of grammar change kind of thing. But it's like if you say, there are now 11,672 registered voters in Westwood, source 2017 registrars, whatever. You know, like the data needs to be sources cited whenever there's a statement of a fact like that. But I mean, a lot of things are going to be, you know, many residents say that you can't footnote everything if it's like not claiming data. But if it's something where it says the number of single-family homes equals this, then what's the source? So I think it's not a change though. It's more important to just get it right now. Like what's the current, you know, if you're gonna make a statement of what the median price of a home in Westwood is, it's like, well, source, Banker and Tradesman, survey of 2018, not just a bunch of realtors said.
Total evidence, yeah.
But I also agree that this comprehensive plan update is tied into our housing production plan and the vision of what the town has. And I think that the sources and the references need to be made available.
Yes, of course, it is gonna be, that's what a comprehensive plan is, there's all the footnotes, most of it will come from the census, so that's what staff is working on. It's mostly me, but I'll be relying on other staff that we have in town and helping with that data update. So staff is doing the bulk of the data updates, and the steering committee members are doing the writing, more of the capturing the ideas, the goals, the vision, the objectives of the residents. So that's their job is to write that down, updated for 2019 for the future. But staff is going to be updating the data. So it's not available yet just because I'm getting to it.
It's in progress.
It's in progress.
Sounds like a
And
lot of work.
The goal
Thank you
is
for doing that.
at least the sections at least the individual sections will be, you know, my goal is to have that for the steering committee members when they have their first meeting, hopefully in a month.
Okay, so we have, you say November 5th meeting, nothing scheduled yet, but we don't have any open, we don't have anything continued to that time, and just making sure we don't, we have the one thing that's been specifically continued to November 27th. So I guess if nothing comes up, you would let us know.
Yes, if you don't mind holding the date for our 7 PM in case something comes in. For example, you have those A&R plans those are only due a few days before. So if you get something like that, I would let you know, and try to get on that at 7 in this room, and then we could walk over to the police station next door for the full meeting with the selectmen, which starts at 7:30. We received 2 applications, at least, I think, 2 applications, and some people had expressed interest in the associate member position, so I had to check to see if anything else was filed. So I will get you those for your November 5th meeting. The associate planning board members have to be a joint meeting with you and the selectmen, and it's you would all have to vote in the meeting for the applicants.
Is it an interview type process?
Yes, that's what we did last time, so I'll give you, I'll have to check what we did last time, I think, last time.
Last time we
said
had
some.
multiple people for
Yeah.
2 spots,
Yeah.
so we had to,
You had to.
and then we all voted on it.
Yeah.
If we have 2 for 2 spots, I'm not certain an interview is, it's kind of
Very
like,
efficient, yeah.
if you're running unopposed, do you need yard signs? You know, it's kind of, I mean, it's fine to do it, but
You don't
There's
have to
some
accept
guidance.
it's fine to do
You
it.
don't
always-
have to vote them in though.
Right, it's like you don't have to vote for them.
It's true, you can abstain,
But,
I mean,
you know, it's always good to have the person, if there's no opposition, then someone would say, I'm excited about this, and here's why I think I'm gonna
No,
do a
I'm
great
just
job.
pointing out how it played out last time. We had about 6 people for 2 spots.
So I'll give you some guidance next week on the November 5th meeting.
So we did have a couple of other things. One is the meeting minutes to
Oh.
approve. which is also relevant because there's a challenge to our decision on the tennis courts.
Does that go before Board of Appeals, or does that come through, what happens?
They filed with the court. Usually the first step is the zoning board of appeals. So I expect that's likely what the court will say is the first step is to go to zoning board of appeals.
So then do we go to the zoning board of appeals too, or no?
No, not usually, because they're like a third party, quasi judicial review board.
What are the grounds?
They said it was arbitrary.
Yeah, it's arbitrary, capricious, exceeded our authority.
Yeah.
But
So
it's
the
What, the actual improvement?
So technically, we're named plaintiffs in a pro se in a lawsuit that they've opened themselves.
Not the first time.
What is the mechanics of that? So we don't have to appear at court or anything like that. It's just
Town council was
Yeah,
it?
town council would report on it.
and then maybe it'll get kicked. It'll get referred to appeals or whatever. But it's relevant because they might want to. We should have the meeting minutes available.
Right, and then you could provide comments to the zoning board like we do when you do get other applications, so you would summarize the application, yes.
So can we hold off on approving those minutes?
Well, no, I'm saying that I looked over them. I was fine with the meeting minutes. It says
Yeah, I did too.
We should approve them.
It's how I
unless we have an
remember it
objection,
happening.
and then they can be requested versus like saying, why haven't you approved those minutes yet?
If you're ready to approve them, it'd be good to approve them tonight, in case the abutters looking for them. Since that was, how many weeks ago was that? 2 weeks ago?
Which,
What, the approval?
Yeah, that was
We
those
approved
meetings.
those a month ago.
It was 9:25, I think.
It's almost a month ago.
Wow, yeah. Mhm.
so make a motion to approve the September 25th meeting minutes?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? September 25th is approved. How about November 9th?
October.
I'll make a motion to approve the October 9th meeting minutes.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No, those are approved. Any other updates, Abby?
In your packet tonight, there was a list of workshops from Citizen Planning Training Collaborative. I will email them to you. I didn't get a recent notification, but they do have really good workshops in the evenings at low cost. They're designed for planning board members and zoning board members, so I strongly recommend if you can go to any. Unfortunately, I think there's one tonight. But they have them throughout November. Subdivision and site plan review are pretty good. There's one on a master plan.
The best one is planning with community support, which is so thoughtfully scheduled Wednesday, October 31st, 7 to 9 p.m.
Halloween.
Get you out of it.
Oh, I've got to go to a,
Well, that's absurd.
No, they can.
But I can email this to you too, so you have that. But if you can make it to any of those, they are very helpful.
And we get points, like when you go to these things, the town gets a reduction in their insurance costs based on the fact that people have taken certain of these. If you
Yeah,
take the
so
one that
if you-
tells you how to do your job, it kind of helps the town with insurance.
Does this guy live in town? He looks familiar.
Yes, that's
he's a
Jeff
board
Wigan.
member.
He was formerly on the planning board.
Okay.
Chad?
Yeah, so
Yeah,
yeah,
good.
he's on
That's
the
Jeff
cover,
Wigan.
yeah. Housing production plan, the housing partnership is getting started on their housing production plan, and they have a survey out, so
Take the
if you
survey.
please take the survey and pass it on to anyone who might be interested. And there will be another visioning workshop on Tuesday, November 13th at 7 p.m. at Downey School in the cafeteria. So if you can make that meeting as well, or spread the word.
Spread the word. All right, anything else?
Make a motion to adjourn?
Oh, so we heard one more.
Yeah.
Islington Center updates, we, CVS signed the lease.
Yeah.
So that's, that property is finally ready
Right.
to move forward on their end. The regulatory agreement for the additional third unit at 321 Washington Street, the third affordable unit, that was approved. They still have to approve the marketing plan, but it's one step closer to getting all 3 units approved that would then go on to our subsidized housing inventory. So it's not totally approved for that point yet, but it's on the way, the third unit regulatory agreement. And the Blue Heart Tavern, I realized those restoration funds, so Petruzziello is working to submit us something outlining his proposal for the Blue Heart Tavern and what he'd like to restore that to. He'd like to relocate it to where it was shown on the special permit plan. But I realized it wasn't a grant that I thought last time. There was money inserted into the budget by the legislator from Westwood representatives was able to get restoration for that specific building for the Blue Heart Tavern to be included in the budget, some funding. So that's where the funding source is coming from. So that's why it wasn't an open grant that was open for anyone to apply to. It was specifically for helping save that building.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Oh, excuse me.
Sure.
If I may, I have one more question. The survey for the housing plan, could you tell me who the administrator of that survey is and what the parameters of the survey are?
The
Please.
Housing Partnership had created the survey, and
The,
I think
the survey you take online.
the Housing Partnership created the survey. That's a committee, so that's staffed by the housing and zoning agent, Sarah Bouchard. So she was the staff person that created the
I'm
survey.
familiar with Sarah. So I contact Sarah to find out what the parameters of that survey are?
Yes.
Okay,
Yep, and
thank you.
The details of it. I think you're probably asking about the
I'm asking about what the
responses.
controls are.
The controls.
That someone in Cambridge doesn't log in and take our survey.
So it's not, generally, they're not, limited to things like that. So I just know that in that
Yeah,
case.
I think,
Somebody can set locks too.
I don't know
Yeah,
how
but
you
that
would
makes it
know.
too, you can't. And the bottom line is, unless there's 9,000 psychopaths out there trying to affect what goes on in the town of Westwood, it's really not an issue.
It's also relevant to get the opinions of people who don't live in the town but who are connected to the town because they spend all their
Work
time
in the
working
town,
here
sure.
or employed by the town or, thinking of moving here. And, there's lots of different reasons why it might be relevant to consider a lot of other opinions. And it's not like the survey's not, well,
I did review this with Sarah, and I believe she said that there was a way to the IP address for the computer. So I think there was a way to put that limit to 1 per IP address, but there is no way to capture where people are taking the survey from. There's also paper copies that were distributed in town, so there's no way to stop people from filling out multiple paper copies as well. So Sarah could know the specific details, but I know we did talk about what the options were, and she had evaluated certain survey formats.
And it was the best version she could come up with.
Thank you.
Nothing's foolproof.
No, I think surveys are not the most beneficial way to get information.
I have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
Aye.
We are adjourned.